Welcome to our deep dive today into some really captivating stuff from The House of Morgan by Ron Chernow. It's like almost a cheat sheet to understanding this financial dynasty, how they got so big and powerful, some of their, well, quirks, and the way they've shaped American finance.
It's a fascinating journey, almost like peeking behind the curtain of history. It's perfect for those who, want to understand things quickly but still get the full picture.
So we're breaking down these complex financial concepts, share some pretty amazing stories, and hopefully you'll have a few aha moments along the way.
I hope so.
So let's start with a simple question. What pops into your mind when you hear the House of Morgan?
Hmm. For many, I think it's power, exclusivity, maybe even a bit of mystery. Chernai's book really shows us a firm that wasn't just managing money, but almost shaping the whole landscape of American capitalism.
And that image they had, it wasn't by accident, was it? They basically demanded exclusivity from their clients, almost arrogant. But it was a strategy.
Right. Imagine telling a company, look, you can't even talk to another firm or we're done. But businesses actually lined up for the chance to work with Morgan Stanley, drawn to the prestige, that air of success they cultivated.
So counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
Insisting on being the only one managing offerings, it solidified their image as the top dogs,
Mm-hmm.
the Rolls-Royce of investment bankers, as they were called.
Exactly. A title they protected fiercely.
And where did all this meticulous image control come from?
Deeply rooted belief system.
Yeah,
We can trace it back to Junius Spencer Morgan, J.P. Morgan's father. He wasn't just a good businessman. He embodied a real contradiction.
you're referring to that telescopic philanthropy, I think it was called.
Oh, absolutely. Generous to humanity as a concept, but famously frugal with individuals.
Why? Where did that come from?
Deeply ingrained sense of order, hierarchy, influenced every aspect of his life, shaped his criteria for choosing a successor, too.
Right, he had to be American, family man, experienced in foreign trade, traits that became synonymous with the Morgan legacy. Then entered J.P. Morgan himself, arriving on Wall Street right in the middle of that 1873 panic. Thousands of firms just collapsed under the pressure. But he not only survived, he thrived.
He skillfully used his father's British connections to navigate the turmoil. What's truly interesting is how he balanced that cutthroat world with his strong religious convictions.
It seems like a strange pairing, doesn't it? A devout Episcopalian running a financial empire? How did his faith actually play out in his dealings?
He saw religion as a moral guide, almost like a compass. His pronouncements against unethical business practices, he was almost like a preacher.
It's this mix of devoutness and ruthlessness that makes him so fascinating.
Without a doubt.
It's not just JP's story, though. His family, especially his wife Fanny and their son Jack, adds a whole other dimension.
Their relationship offers a real window into their lives. Jack was very protective of his often melancholic mother. They both understood JP's, shall we say, complex character.
It reminds us that even these powerful figures, they had families, internal struggles, just like everyone.
Exactly. They were not just titans of finance.
Speaking of titans, J.P. Morgan seemingly had the power to control entire markets. During the panic of 1907, he stepped in, orchestrated interventions, even audited the Knickerbocker Trust Company. Then he brought together a whole committee of bankers to stabilize everything.
Absolutely. He understood that restoring faith in the system was crucial. It wasn't just about individual firms, it was about the integrity of American finance as a whole. His actions weren't just smart financially, they were real leadership in a national crisis. But that very influence, well, it attracted scrutiny. The Peugeot committee hearings put J.P. Morgan in the hot seat, defending his practices, even the structure of Wall Street itself.
But public anxiety about so much financial power in one place, clashing with the very man who seemed to hold it all.
Right. Showed the tension between private enterprise and public interest, a debate that's still going on today, really.
And within the Morgan family, this tension played out differently too. JP's relationship with his daughter Anne was strained, highlights the changes happening in society at the time. Anne, with her progressive activism, her push for social justice, such a contrast to her father's conservative worldview.
It wasn't just a generation gap, though. It was a clash of fundamental values.
Anne's story shows us how even in a powerful dynasty, there's that desire for individual expression, that push against legacy.
Exactly.
Then comes JP's death. The leadership goes to his son, Jack, leading the firm through World War I, unprecedented challenges,
Yeah.
ethical dilemmas.
The House of Morgan got deeply involved in financing the Allies, acting as purchasing agents, caught in a web of political and economic interests.
Difficult to grasp the pressure, The moral choices Jack must have faced, decisions with global consequences.
No doubt.
Their work, though it was profitable, led to accusations of, well, war profiteering, the tension between national loyalty and profit in war.
The constant theme, isn't it?
Echoes their history, too.
Yeah.
Junius using his connections to shore up American credit during that Maryland bond crisis. Now Jack's actions during World War I on a global scale.
And Jack's personal fondness for Britain, his Anglophilia, further intertwined their fates. Buying that grand Walhall estate, that was symbolic of their connection.
But even with global conflicts swirling around them, there was a storm brewing closer to home. The Glass-Steagall Act.
Yeah.
Legislation that would reshape American finance as we know it.
A response to the '29 crash, of course, it mandated separating commercial and investment banking, a real watershed moment, the end of an era of almost unchecked financial power.
Forced evolution almost. The House of Morgan, used to operating with very few limits, had to adapt.
And they did, forming Morgan Guaranty Trust Company. But then, despite their aversion to retail banking, they made a bold move, a Tokyo branch, 1971.
It's amazing to think of this American powerhouse navigating the intricacies of the Japanese financial system. What was that like?
Well, just getting the branch license was a long and complicated process, a testament to their tenacity.
Had to overcome cultural barriers, navigate these dense regulations, convince the Japanese authorities they were serious about their commitment.
Right. Shows their global ambition, but also their flexibility, adapting their approach for different cultures.
Exactly. And this move into Japan wasn't without its internal debate, was it?
Oh, definitely. Some within Morgan Guaranty question the wisdom of entering such a tightly controlled system.
Ironic, isn't it? The firm that once called the shots in American finance, now having to carefully maneuver within the Japanese system.
It highlights a key theme, balancing their legacy with the realities of a globalized financial world. Entering Japan was a calculated risk, but one that ultimately paid off, gaining them a foothold in a booming economy.
Their evolution didn't stop there, though, did it?
Yeah.
The 1980s brought a whole wave of financial innovations, high-stakes mergers and acquisitions.
Oh, absolutely. And Morgan Stanley was right in the thick of it.
With a certain aggressive edge, you could say.
Yes. Their involvement in that distillers' takeover battle, orchestrated by Ernest Saunders, it showed a real departure from their old way of doing things.
This wasn't about gentlemen's agreements anymore.
No. This was about winning, even if it meant pushing ethical boundaries.
They were embracing that corporate raider mentality, more cutthroat style.
Aggressive share buybacks, complex offshore entities, it brought in huge profits, but also raised questions about their ethics.
And then the Guinness scandal that followed. It really exposed the underbelly of that takeover.
Tarnished their reputation, shook the city of London to its core.
It was a stark reminder that even institutions as prestigious as Morgan Stanley weren't immune to greed.
Or the consequences.
The fallout forced them to reckon with their actions, reevaluate their commitment to ethical conduct.
And as we move deeper into the 80s, another innovation takes center stage, leveraged buyouts, LBOs. Complex, high-risk, high-reward, defined the era.
Morgan Stanley jumped into LBOs, seeing a new avenue for profit. But it wasn't without controversy. Concerns arose about conflicts of interest. Were they acting as advisors or were they investors? The lines blurred.
Made people question their fiduciary responsibilities.
Clients who were used to Morgan Stanley's impartiality started wondering about their motives. Was the advice truly in their best interest? Or was it all about maximizing their own gains?
This tension shows the challenges investment banks were facing, trying to reconcile traditional client service with the pursuit of profit in this new, more aggressive environment.
But amidst all that, Morgan Guaranty seemed to cling to their traditional values a bit more, emphasize internal cohesion, putting client relationships first.
It was a deliberate effort to keep that sense of identity, remind themselves of their roots in a financial world that felt increasingly impersonal.
Right.
But even their carefully crafted image, it wasn't immune to the changing times. Their plan to create a banking giant through a merger with 6 upstate banks, well, that hit regulatory roadblocks.
The era of unbridled expansion was over.
Exactly. And that new reality was driven home by the sudden collapse of continental Illinois, a crisis that truly shook the American financial system.
Their rapid decline. It was fueled by risky lending practices, and then depositors just lost confidence. It threatened to set off a chain reaction of bank failures.
exposed how interconnected the global financial system really was, how fragile that trust was that held it all together.
This crisis was a test for the whole banking industry, and Morgan Guarantee and other major institutions had to respond.
They worked with Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker, providing emergency funding, a desperate attempt to stabilize things to avoid a complete meltdown.
Showed the vital role that central banks play in keeping the financial system stable, and the power of collective action in a crisis.
This whole episode underlined the delicate balance between financial innovation and regulation, raised some big questions about whether safeguards were enough, and the potential for moral hazard, issues that are still relevant today.
As we move into the later 20th century, there's an interesting shift in the relationship between Morgan Guarantee and Morgan Stanley.
The two entities, once so closely linked, start to go their separate ways.
Morgan Guarantee focusing on their global reach.
Yeah.
Morgan Stanley becoming this powerhouse in mergers and acquisitions,
Right.
like a sibling rivalry on a massive scale,
Yeah.
each trying to dominate their own corner of finance.
Sometimes they cooperated, sometimes they competed, shows how dynamic the industry was. Those lines between banking, investing, and advisory services, they kept getting blurrier.
And throughout all this, the House of Morgan, with its incredible history and its legacy, it had to constantly adapt to stay relevant.
Their journey, spanning generations, marked by both triumphs and setbacks. It's a fascinating lens through which to view the evolution of American finance.
Before we wrap up, let's distill this complex story into, say, 10 key takeaways for our listeners.
Wonderful idea. It'll help highlight the main themes and the lasting influence of the House of Morgan.
Okay, so here are 10 key insights we've uncovered. Number 1, the House of Morgan built its prominence by cultivating an image of exclusivity and prestige, demanding absolute loyalty from their clients.
That carefully crafted image drew in companies who were eager to be associated with the Morgan name.
2, successive generations of Morgans, starting with Junius and then Jack, they successfully navigated periods of financial instability, often emerging as saviors during crises that threatened the American economy.
Their ability to use their connections, influence policy, and restore confidence, it speaks volumes about their skill and leadership during uncertain times.
3, J.P. Morgan's deep religious beliefs. It might seem odd in the world of high finance, but they were a guiding principle for him, shaped his actions and his worldview.
This moral framework, rooted in his Episcopalian faith, it reveals the many sides to his personality.
Number 4, the family dynamics within the Morgan dynasty, especially Jack's close relationship with his mother, Fanny. It offers a different perspective on these powerful figures, reminds us that they were human, shaped by their relationships just like everyone else.
These personal glimpses give us a richer understanding of their motivations and their complexities.
5, the House of Morgan's crucial role in financing the Allies during World War I. It shows the intersection of finance, global politics, and the ethical dilemmas faced by those with such global influence.
Their actions, while profitable, attracted criticism, accusations of war profiteering, highlighting that tension between national interests and making money in a conflict.
6, Jack Morgan's love of all things British, his Anglophilia, had a significant impact on their decisions and their transatlantic relationships.
Right. This fondness for British culture and society shaped their business practices and their interactions with key figures on both sides of the Atlantic.
7, the passing of the Glass-Steagall Act, mandating the separation of commercial and investment banking, a real turning point in American finance.
It forced the House of Morgan to adapt to this new regulatory landscape.
8, Morgan Guarantee's expansion into Japan, setting up their Tokyo branch, shows their determination to overcome cultural barriers and gain a foothold in a rapidly growing global economy.
This strategic move, despite the challenges and internal debates, proved their willingness to adapt and navigate uncharted territory.
9, Morgan Stanley's moved into high-stakes mergers and acquisitions, best exemplified by their role in that distiller's takeover battle, showed a new, more aggressive approach to investment banking.
This shift, driven by ambition and the lure of big profits, exposed a less savory side of Wall Street, where making money sometimes overshadowed ethical concerns.
And finally, number 10, the House of Morgan, despite its legendary status, was not immune to the forces that reshaped the financial world.
Their story reminds us of the importance of adapting, innovating, and navigating the complexities of a globalized world.
As we conclude our deep dive into the House of Morgan, we leave you with this. How might the financial world we live in today be different had this institution never existed?
Their story is a powerful reminder that finance is not just numbers and transactions. It's a human endeavor, driven by personalities, ambitions, and the constant interplay of power and influence.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of the House of Morgan. We hope you've gained valuable insights.
Until our next exploration, keep seeking knowledge, keep questioning assumptions, and keep embracing the complexities of our world.